Here's a few more of the statistics from the MLRC. Again, and nothing particularly startling here. The cases are, percolating, and certainly things that that we pay attention to see if they're developing into any kind of trends. The next couple of slides on blogging, just some best practice things. Some of them, you look at it and you say, oh, that's pretty much common sense, and it is. I get back to the point that I think we've said before in a couple of instances. I sense sometimes that, when there's a fair amount of care and maybe some established policies and procedures for your quote-unquote traditional broadcast content, that oftentimes there's a feeling like, well, on the internet or on the website, those same sensitivities don't apply. And I think, oftentimes then folks are surprised when, oh, geez, here comes a copyright infringement claim. What do you mean we can't just copy and cut and paste from other sites, without permission? There seems to be an informality, maybe a lack of civility, and not maybe so much by the bloggers themselves, but by the third-party posters, particularly anonymous posters. And again, you're not going to be responsible for that content. I'm just saying that seems to be a tone of things that that we're seeing out there. Blogs tend to be different than traditional reporting pieces, and if your intent is to make it an opinion piece, make it obvious that you're stating your opinion, and be careful about factual statements. Make sure if you're blogging, the factual statements included in your blog, the same confirmation and corroboration that you would use in your traditional media broadcast products. For those that are, continually and expanding their social media content for the newsrooms, I think this slide, which was really developed by the RTDNA last year when a committee was putting together some best practices and issues relating to ethics and law on social media content, just making sure that folks in the newsroom step back and talk about and raise questions about what's your newsroom doing with respect to these issues, what's your experience been, what protocols and practices do you have when it comes from, gathering information from social media sources and or using social media outlets as part of your essentially product, your broadcast product. This is a question that, again, I continue to be somewhat surprised about reactions that people will take to this slide. If your organization is the originator of the tweet, you may be liable for anything libelous or defamatory posted on that tweet. It's a publication. Just in the traditional sense as if you were handing out a newsletter or a pamphlet or a newspaper. It is a publication, and if you are the poster or the publisher or the originator, may be held responsible for the content if it's defamatory. If you're retweeting, be careful. This one, certainly, again, not seen any specific cases on it, but at least in terms of the legal analysis, I think I'd be fairly confident to say that a retweet may essentially constitute a republication of a defamatory content or defamatory statement. So if you were passing along a tweet and retweeting it, turns out that it's defamatory content, the retweeters or the republishers may find themselves independently liable. Realize that republishing a libelous tweet on your station's website may be held to a stricter standard. This issue, again, is something I think that's still evolving a little bit. So when we were talking before about online user-generated content, and we talked about posts from third parties, the user-generated content that you as the website or the internet service provider would not be responsible for. I see a lot of broadcasters now taking those website postings, which would be protected in that context on the website, and pulling them up and using them as part of their traditional media broadcast, either on the television or on the radio. They essentially saying, let me read to you some of the comments that have just been posted on our website. That's taken the protection away. It's taken that Section 230 immunity away, and I think you got to be careful and make sure that if you're using the online content in that fashion, that you're paying particular attention to any defamatory content. Last issue, a special attention to the issue of balance or fairness. And I would say when we get to this is this is not a legal issue. And when we went through the elements, the legal elements of the defamation claim, there was no element that said, you know, that the plaintiff had to show, you know, lack of balance or lack of fairness. This is really just a practical issue that we see all the time, and it's the type of best practice or risk management that, again, vetting a piece pre-broadcast, we'd say, you know, is there any obvious bias here? And again, looking at maybe the sources or the overall tone of the broadcast content. Has our staff, has there been some failure to interview critical witnesses, ignored critical witnesses or other available evidence? Have we given the subject or target of a story a meaningful opportunity to respond? And that, you know, that's going to vary under the circumstances, but what has been our effort, if any, to provide a meaningful opportunity to respond? A failure to present both or all sides of the story. Again, there's not a legal requirement that the story be balanced or that both sides be given, but you can be darn sure that if both sides have been given, if there's been fairness in trying to provide both sides, even if the target of the story chooses not to respond, is there some other exculpatory or positive information in that subject's favor that we can include in the story in some fashion? I think it oftentimes will help prevent a claim from ever being brought, or certainly one being litigated very significantly. Okay, that's it in terms of the slides. Again, apologize for the early problems with audio and visual, but if there are additional questions at this point, certainly happy to try to address them. I know we raced through some things pretty quickly. If you have questions on any of these slides or any of the any other issues that we didn't talk about, happy to try to field them right now.
Yeah, I have one question here. Are there some good examples of correction policies that apply to broadcast and online content, especially when there's a broadcast error that's corrected online?
You know, a good question. I wouldn't. I'm not sure I'm able to put my finger in anything, any written guidelines as such, but clearly, and a good point here in terms of recognizing that if content needs to be corrected, you know, both in the traditional sense of doing a follow-up broadcast, correcting a prior issue or problem with the broadcast content, that's obviously one thing, and then to make sure that if that content also exists in some form on a website or internet site, that a correction is tagged or posted or made pretty pretty evident on the website content as well.
Any additional questions for Dick before we wrap it up for the afternoon? And I guess, Dick, you're making yourself available if someone should think of something and need to email you?
Absolutely. I think, let me just see if there's our website, and I think if you go back to, if you go on the website, you'll find my email address. It's rgaehler, it's rgoehler at fbtlaw.com. Any follow-up questions, shoot me an email. Be happy to try to address it.
Very good.
And again, apologize for the technical difficulties.
Okay, very good. And I'll just remind everyone that the next PRNDI webinar is on tap for Thursday, March 24th at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and we'll be focusing on writing radio leads. If you have an example of a good, bad, or just an average lead, we still need some examples. We'd like some real-life examples for that webinar session, so you can email me at gbodarky@wfuv.org with your examples. Otherwise, thank you so much. Dick Gaehler, thank you very much.
Thanks, George. Appreciate it, and I enjoyed the opportunity.
Great. Take care all. Bye-bye.
You bet.